Good morning. I actually just finished this book this morning, and I really wanted to talk about it. Song of the Dark Man, Father of Witches, Lord of the Crossroads by Darragh Mason, or Darragh. It has a foreword by Peter Mark Adams, who is the author of The Game of Saturn. If you're subscribed to the Spirit Box on YouTube, or if you follow him on Instagram and you do not have this book and you like his content, then you need this book. For those who don't know, from the Fortean phantoms that terrorized Victorian England to the haunted crossroads of the Irish hinterlands, the devil, also known as the Dark Man, has found countless novel ways to influence culture and bring us face to face with our fears. Tracing this enigmatic entity through the centuries via mythology, folklore, occult writings, and modern accounts, Darragh Mason shows how the Dark Man is more than just a myth. He is a real presence in our world. Drawing on Irish manuscripts dating back to the 12th century, testimony from 17th century Scottish witches, his own experiences and interviews with contemporary witches and mystics, Mason builds the case for the pattern of the Dark Man phenomenon, showing what his presence can mean, what it's like for those who experience him, and how his appearance serves as a calling to the path of witchcraft. In doing so, Mason challenges conventional understandings of the Dark Man as an evil presence, emphasizing his role in questioning authority and liberating individuals from the confines of strict social convention. He shows how the Dark Man's presence serves as a potent illustrator of the battles between light and dark. But, Mason emphasizes, these stories of the Dark Man are not necessarily just folk tales. Sharing a series of interviews with contemporary figures, including Orion Foxwood and Peter Gray, who speak of the nature of the spirit and their experiences with him, the author illustrates how encounters with the Dark Man can challenge you to make changes, often painful ones, and how, if you meet his challenges, you may be bestowed with mystical gifts and initiated into witchcraft. Ultimately, Mason shows how the Dark Man may be a liberating figure. If one faces him and moves beyond the fear, he can open the door to a richer, more fulfilling, and more magical life. Darragh Mason is a writer, researcher, and award-winning travel and documentary photographer. Mason hosts the award-nominated podcast Spirit Box, best known for his work on the Algori and Jinn. He lives in East Sussex, UK. I will tell you that if you do not want to read of dark things, the Dark Man, the devil, meeting him, and certain encounters that can happen with him, then don't read the book. I will tell you that. It has several people talking about it. Aidan Wachter did a review. Phil Hine, author of Condensed Chaos and Queerifying Cultures. Carl Abrahamson, filmmaker, photographer, musician, and author of Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan. Joshua Cutchin, speaker and author of Ecology of Souls. Douglas Batchelor, host of the What Magic Is This podcast. Nathaniel J. Gillis, lecturer, religious demonologist, and author of A Moment Called Man. Jack Hunter, PhD, author of Manifesting Spirits. I got this from Books A Million for $18.99. 2024. The contents has acknowledgments, a foreword, introduction, folkloric footprints of a nameless god. Part 1 is folklore and witchcraft, fire in the blood, the black magician of the men of God, Oisin, the little fawn, the dark interceptor, tricky trickster, culture changer, the dark womb, and rewilding the soul, confessions of witches. Part 2, the witnesses and witches. These are the interviews he has with Elise Orsa of Blood and Ink, Jessica Mitchell, Glastonbury Tour, Shelley H. Porter, Death and the Dark Man. Megan Rose, Ph.D. Orion Foxwood, The Dark Rider and the Crossroads. Peter Gray and Alcestis Demech. David Beth on Master Leonard, and then Hearing His Song. Then it has notes, bibliography, and an index. So forward. I usually read the first paragraph. Song of the Dark Man is an important text, one that fills a notable gap in the annals of occult research. It provides a dedicated focus on a key, one may even say foundational subject, the Dark Man of the Witch's Sabbath. A being of myth, but also a shapeshifter, one who is prone to stepping out of the world of folklore and taking on an all too real presence in the lives of those who encounter him. Despite the apparent intimacy of the highly personal encounters recounted in this book, the Dark Man nevertheless manages to retain a certain archetypal quality, one that conveys an essentially cosmic rather than mundane nature, and to exert a presence whose varied manifestations span centuries across diverse cultures. Then it talks about who he is. The introduction is called Folkloric Footprints of a Nameless God. To ask who is the Dark Man is to fall at the first hurdle. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved or understood in their entirety, and an attempt to do so is a fool's errand. There's a joke about asking directions in rural Ireland, where a tourist inquires of a local man, "How do I get to X town?" Only to be told, "Well, I wouldn't start from here." It's frustrating advice asking, "Who is the Dark Man?" It will lead you to frustration, because who is not the right place to start. Rather, what is. Even then, what will be answered with a menagerie of metaphors and similes and contradictions. It talks about all of his names and what this book is going to be, all the folklore and stuff it's going to be drawing from. This is not an academic book. He's not a scholar. This is not a book of spells and incantations. He's not a magical authority. This book is for the curious and the haunted. There is a veiled pattern in folklore, one that is mirrored specifically in experiences of witches and magicians, and the purpose of this book is to explore that pattern and reflect on it. Part 1 is Folklore and Witchcraft, Fire in the Bloods. It starts out 9th of February, 1855, the local people of X Estuary in South Devon woke up to find 100 miles of cloven hoof prints set in the deep snow. It was a phenomenon that became known as the Devil's Footprints. All different kinds of stories. Chapter 2 is the Black Magician of the Men and Gods. It's talking about the myths and mythologies and folklore are templates for the spectrum of the human experience. Some tales have a secret knowledge. So this is all, one of them is like the fairy women as deer. So it goes into that. Fionn, Oisin, it's a whole fairy tale, and how she was in the end captured by the Dark Man. And when he came upon, where he found out where she went, he found Oisin, which would have been his son, but he did not find her. And his son, the little fawn, in chapter 3, is where he talks about him. He searched for 7 years for her, and he finds a young boy in the forest whom he recognizes as his and Sabi's child. The boy tells Fiona of his years spent in fairyland when the Dark Man kept him and Sabi, still in deer form, in a cave before finally sending the boy to the world of men. So the boy is telling him all about his life. Chapter 4, The Dark Interceptor. The roads we travel are liminal in nature. They are in between places that connect everything and everywhere. The road exposes vulnerability and promises adventure. Even with modern convenience, we're no strangers to the challenges that travel can present. The threat of crime, the plans gone awry. Traveling is full of uncertainty, and it forces the traveler to adapt as the road dictates the way, and one has little choice but to navigate as best one can. To travel is to leave the safety of our homes and sometimes the safety of the human world. Otherworldly dangers can intercept the traveler when they are at their most vulnerable. Being intercepted, some stories about coming into contact with a dark man. Different stories from different people. Chapter 5, The Tricky Trickster, Culture Changer. The trickster is a vector of chaos and change. He shakes up our lives and understandings with all manner of wicked tricks, wonders, terrors, and deliberate contradictions. He laughs at our plans and ambitions, sending us down blind alleys and on fool's errands. He exasperates with nonsensical communication peppered with revelations. He leads us in circles and defies categorization. Ultimately, he calls us to initiation. If we pay close attention, we might just get the joke. If we listen without discernment, we might be the punchline. And it goes into the Pied Piper story. That's the oldest picture of the Pied Piper, a copy from the glass window of the market church in Hamelin, Germany, 1300, 1633. Note the cave entrance to the other world in the top right. I underline this. I actually put this quote on Facebook like last week or so when I saw it. If anything, our deployments of technological wonder shows that the more we advance, the more dangerous we become to ourselves and to the planet. The dark man. He is not the central figure of the story in St. Patrick's, what it's talking about. He is the dark and mysterious figure in the background, pulling our strings like marionettes. We dance and he laughs, and sometimes we lose our children. Chapter 6, The Dark Womb and Rewilding the Soul. It talks about our first temples were caves, deep wombs within the earth. Our ancestors lived and died in them. Inspired by the creative impulse, they crawled through the dark tunnels of the underworld to paint scenes of hunting, to leave stencil handprints on the walls as if to say, I am alive. Among these scenes, there are other beings depicted, half human, half animal, antlered and horned beings. These therianthropic figures adorn caves throughout the world. And I put this picture on Facebook. The Salmon of Knowledge. I was surprised to find this in here because I actually have a video planned to do about the Salmon of Knowledge. And how I can find that folklore within my own, with this land, not particularly this land, but in Florida or, United States. Some different Native American folk tales having to do with fish that we also have. As witches and storytellers, the wild spirits call to us and initiate the process of rewilding our souls. It is up to us to finish it, to leave our handprint on the cave wall and say, I do not merely exist. I'm not a hollow being. I am alive. Chapter 7, Some Confessions of Witches. As with the jinn and the fairies, modern American culture has largely defamed the meaning of being a witch and practicing witchcraft. The Linen She became Tinkerbell. The Ifrit became Aladdin's singing genie. So too, the witch has been sanitized. There were very good reasons to fear the witch. It was, after all, the ultimate other, part wild, dangerous with fire in the blood. Equally, the witch served a purpose as an intermediary between the other world forces that butted up against the rural communities. The witch could remove fairy maleficence, but equally could be the vehicle for its delivery. Romanticizing the pastoral life of the early modern British and Irish peasant is disingenuous. Life as a subsistence farmer was brutal and hung on a knife edge between serfdom and starvation. These communities hedged their bets and prayed to God for salvation and to the devil for survival. The death or illness of a key family member would condemn the survivors to destitution and death. It was against this desperate background that the dark man or an emissary often made his appearance with the offer of a deal. The Survey of Scottish Witchcraft is a resource for the history of witchcraft and witch hunting in Scotland. There are nearly 4,000 individuals, all who have known to have been accused of witchcraft in early modern Scotland. They're included in that database, so you can actually look that up. It has Isabel Gowdy in here and her story and her interaction and relationship with the Dark Man. Historian Emma Wilby, her book, The Visions of Isabel Gowdy, Magic, Witchcraft, and Dark Shamanism in 17th Century Scotland. Or did I underline that verse? No. Not everything I underlined is pertinent to this review. Richard Payne Knight discussed Pan in his discourse on the worship of Priapus, 1786. The Dictionnaire Infernal by Jacques Collin de Plancy is a list of demons organized into hierarchies and attributes used and by the description of their manifestations. It was first published in 1818 and republished in 1863. He also describes Master Leonard in there. Books by Eliphas Levi. He has sources on Master Leonard in the Ritual of Transcendental Magic. You can find several books by him. Even Robert Artisan in his book, The Horn of Evanwood, considers the slippery nature of the dark man's shape-shifting. The Witch Father has existed in every era of human history, and in the countless eras before that. He's been worshipped as God, feared as a devil, and sought by the wise in thousands of forms and disguises. For all of that, he can't rightly be called a god, an angel, a devil, a spirit, or a man. Sure, he is those things, depending on who you ask, but he's also none of those things. If you try to catch him, you'll find that it's impossible. This is because he's a turnskin, a master shapeshifter who has no native form which can be caught. One of the greatest tricks is to slip out of any net, any trap, even the traps of death and mortality. Yeah, part 2 is Witnesses and Witches. This really got interesting. The first one he talks about in chapter 8 is Elise Orsa. She is the author of Blood and Ink Tarot. She's a card reader, an artist, a practicing witch, and a creator of the Blood and Ink Tarot. I'm very proud to call her a friend. She's been an invaluable colleague and fellow explorer into the world of the Dark Man. Her witchcraft is largely solitary and spirit-based and has evolved through her experience as a therapist. She is guided by her work with Hecate, her connection to the chthonic currents of the British landscape, and a deep reverence for those who have come before. She teaches on the tarot and designs bespoke rituals of transformation and empowerment. So he has a whole conversation with her and her encounter with the Dark Man and how actually the tarot, the Blood and Ink Tarot, was made. She says here, I think the dark man is like a spirit of manifestation. And I don't mean manifestation like let me help you get a job, but a cosmic force of everything that comes into existence. Then an interview with Jessica Mitchell in chapter 9. She was born and raised in Kansas farm country. She encountered a dark man on the top of Glastonbury Tor in England in 2011. And she talks about in this her encounter with him, with a friend of hers, and what happened with that. Chapter 10 is an interview with Shelley H. Porter called Death and the Dark Man. The Dark Man is a psychopomp and as such has always been associated with death. Hereditary witch Shelley H. Porter was born dead with her umbilical cord around her neck. Her difficult birth gave her the ability to see the dead and the many spirits that exist beyond the veil. Shelley's mother was a cunning woman from whom she learned much about the nature of her gifts. In the language of her tradition, she walks on both sides of the edge. So that's all of her encounter with the dark man. These interviews are so very interesting. Megan Rose in chapter 11, a PhD. She's a transformational psychologist with a PhD in psychology from the California Institute of Integral Studies and an MA in religion from the Graduate Theological Union. The focus of her work is on erotic, occult, and ecological spirituality. She's an initiated ceremonial magician, Shakta Tantric, and a fairy seership practitioner, meaning that she is a witch. She's the author of the book Spirit Marriage, Intimate Relationships with Otherworldly Beings. And she talks about her own spirit marriage with the deity Gwyn Opnud. He is the dark man in one of his many forms. She talks down here. She's talking and she says, old ones sleep for a while, and then they wake up and rise, and maybe they take on a new name, a shape, or a form, and begin to shift and change. After the past few thousand years of patriarchy and its separation of body and mind, we need to reclaim the underworld and its vitalizing energy. And she talks about how the South Asian traditions, they take their deities out of their temples and they wash them off every year. They cleanse and wash them. And she feels like that is what a lot of us are doing right now with the underworld deities. We're sort of stripping off the past 1,000 years or so of projection and vilification to put ourselves back in right relationship with them. She has a quote here from Vivian Crowley that she says, most practitioners of earth traditions do not see their deities as good guys opposed to the universe's baddies. The divine is neither good nor evil, but a force that permeates the universe. It emerges into action out of eternal tranquility and contemplation and returns to stillness once more when each phase of creation is done. There is good and evil, but it is within human beings, not the cosmos. Evil exists not in the form of an external tempter or demon, but in the actions of human beings. The divine itself is neither good nor evil. She's right here, she's talking about having too much light and even too much dark. But she basically says we've been out of balance in the West, so focused on light in the upper world to the point that I think we're experiencing an exhortation from the underworld like, you're fucking out of balance, you need to get back in balance. As Jung said, the tree can only grow as high as the roots grow deep, and y'all need to grow your roots down. Like the first here, when she was first questioning him, or she was thinking, at first I thought, is it Krishna? And he responded, oh, I'm like that. Krishna was based on me. And I thought, well, is this Dionysius? And again, he responded, I'm like that. He's based on me. And then I remembered the peacock god known as Lucifer from the Anderson fairy tradition. And he responded, I'm like that. He's based on me. His MO is not about fixed forms. One of the things that I really like about fairy seership work is that the fairy keys like the guardian or the ancestor, really are archetypal forms and forces. They're not deities. They're not as fixed as a deity. I think these otherworldly forces don't necessarily see us as distinctly as we see ourselves. They see more of the thread of our ancestry or bloodline, like we are a bead on a long chain or thread. And that's for ones that if they've had family in it, you're just the next bead on the threads. Let's see. The part of the initiatory experience is the terror. You have to go through the deconstruction, the dismemberment, the dissolving, but a lot of folks can't get past the terror. They say, oh, no, the dark ones are dangerous. No, they're scary. Don't go there. They'll be monsters. Well, humans can be dangerous as well, right? We do some pretty monstrous things, but that doesn't mean we reject all of humanity. Chapter 12 is Orion Foxwood, the Dark Rider in the Crossroads. He's a witch and an elder in traditional craft and is a Southern Appalachian conjure man. He's a high priest in Alexandrian Wicca and teacher of fairy seership and co-creative magic, an author and a lecturer. He's given talks extensively across the U.S. for nearly 30 years, and he has taught and called magical tours in the United Kingdom. He was born with a veil. So he tells all his story. Talks about the rider that lives in the spirit land, the liminal landscape, along with them folk, also known as fairy, the gray ladies, the devil dogs, the hag riders, and a host of other haints known by old timers and engaged by the witches, spirit workers, those born with the veil, and the conjurers. They're powerful, uncanny sometimes, and may arrive bidden or unbidden, and they have their ways. In short, we don't believe in the Dark Rider. We don't believe in air either, but they both are real and invisible and dangerous to ignore. And it talks about the Dark Rider and the Dark Man, the Horned One. In older traditions, the horns and antlers are holy. This is often why you'll see fairy beings riding on deer. The thing about riding on horses, I believe, came a little later. Deer were first. The arrival of the rider can feel like you were spun around, dizzied, and pierced, and maybe leaking tears or piss, and straddling between uncertainty and assurance, truth and trick, awe and intimidation. For the true witch, our blood boils with power in this tweeny state, when one foot is in the human world and the other in the unseen, but felt, spirit world, so immense and all-pervasive. This is the reason that witches are not seen as not all human. He talks about Christianity, but anthropologists will call it folk Christianity. In other words, conjure workers or witches, and that the Dark Rider has a time when you see him, so they have a whole thing on when and where and how and what time. And then he talks about the old crossroads. They're not just any old crossroads. The old crossroads are colonial, and the colonial crossroads were often built on Native American trade routes. Native American trade routes follow the animal migration patterns, which follow the magnetic lays of the earth. The lays cross each other. They form a well of power at the center. If you can't get to one of those, you go to a bridge over water. And that's the most potent crossroads of them all, because it cannot be claimed by heaven, hell, or the land. It is betwixt. And the most powerful place is right where the bridge crosses the water, because there you'll be in the air, off the earth, and over the water. Barring those, if you don't have it, then the animal track paths in the woods where animals migrate is also excellent. And it talks where people say, like, I'm at a crossroads in my life right now. What they really mean is they're at a place of ambivalence. I see the future changed. I see the past that's either resolved or not resolved. And I see or don't see the options before me, but I know that I must change. I've been summoned by divine directive, divine discontent, or ancestral paradox. I've been summoned here. And at that moment is when you're sitting in the body of the threshold Lord. Let's see. It talks about running into gray ladies, these old women walking the road. When you're going on the way on the crossroads, you may come across gray ladies that are talked about. They are there late at night, and you see them. You're not supposed to stop and talk to them. Don't let them touch you, because then you'll be dead. Then it talks about encounters with a Jesus on the road, or a hitchhiker Jesus. They'll come across that, and let's see. Sometimes you'll feel these walking with you. I remember once he said, "What seek you, my son?" And I was a little humbled, as I was still a little bit more steeped in folk Christianity. And I remember just going, "Jesus, is that you?" And it just goes, "If that's what you want to call me." And all it does is advise you as you're walking, making sure that your heart is clean. I don't know if he comes to everybody, but my elders call him Jesus by the road, or Jesus walking the road. If you're going to the crossroads, this encounter with him has already begun. And the power of what you're going there for is gathering on the way there. And it actually began with the calling to the crossroads. So they say, get yourself clean, get your heart clear before you go there, because he can also be a mirror that will reflect back to you the contents of your hearts. Okay, this is another of Orion's account. Sometimes he comes in strange ways, and when you're working in old magical traditions, we're talking old animistic stuff. We don't look at things as symbols. We look at things as just what they are, right? Like if you go to the Dark Queen of the Underworld and she gives you an apple, don't be saying, "Oh, it must be wisdom." It's an apple. You can't always go on the symbolic thing. That's very human-centric. So we tend to lean on this a little bit too much. And we need to have the experiences, actually is what he's talking about, that make our knees wobble, shake us up a little bit, and make us see that there are powers more ancient and greater than us. And we're just lucky that they care for us. Chapter 13 is Peter Gray and Alkistis Damech. They're founders of the Scarlet Imprint. Peter is the author of The Red Goddess, 2007, which is given a renewed interest in the goddess Babylon. His Apocalyptic Witchcraft, 2013, has been called the most important modern book on witchcraft. His Lucifer Princeps, 2015, is a study of the origins of Lucifer. His collected writings, along with those of Alkistis, are published in The Brazen Vessel, 2019. His most recent work is The Two Antichrists, 2021, on the Antichrist workings of Jack Parsons. Alkistis, it's hard to say her name, is an artist, dance choreographer, and writer exploring the occulted dimensions of the carnal body and its subtle anatomy. Ooh, it's going along. Her art and practice are grounded in Ankoko Buto, a form of Japanese dance theater, which she has practiced since 2002. She has performed solo and in collaboration with musicians. She's spoken on her practice and led workshops at conferences and events. So they're talking about their experiences with the encounters with the dark man. In his writing, Apocalyptic Witchcraft, he was so unimpressed with the direction that neo-paganism has gone in. It seemed to have lost that sense of primal experience. Of this first experience that you're talking about, I think is common to witchcraft. It is that unnerving aspect of it, that non-human, unfiltered encounter, which I think takes us back inevitably to the cave. The cave is where you end up looking at primal places of terror. And actually, Darragh is, he's talking about something, and it's like taking him a long time to get comfortable was what was happening. He had a ritual with two of his friends, and he said it was terrifying. And prior to the book, he was getting communications explicitly directing him off of social media, which we know presents challenges to some of us, and he had a podcast to promote. But he says, I got the direct communication to shut it down and don't engage with it. And Peter's answering, yes, there's a profound conflict between this and the neo-pagan experience. If you attend a ritual and everyone's like, welcome home, you're back, these are your people, that is very different to the experience that you're talking about, which is the experience of the contact with the other, which has this extremely deep-rooted fear response in the middle of it. It's complicated and challenging to find yourself in it. Wild spaces demand that you listen. They demand that you observe. Nature pulls you to engage all senses purposefully. Social media immersion hooks you into a somnambulist cycle of performative and unconscious reactions. Limiting your time is a tremendous act of self-care. And Alkistis says, I think people are in a state of inflammation almost permanently, as if they're waiting to be outraged. The readiness to take offense at perceived slights or any deviation from narrow orthodoxy is hyper-reactive state, and that's a product of modern life. The need to present online, not existing if you don't. That's part of what's unhinging people's nervous systems. And they're taking drugs, whether it's highly sugared coffee or denatured foods, to try to soothe or silence the body, which is breaking up under stress and continual assaults. Chapter 14 is David Beth on Master Leonard. David Beth was born and raised in Africa and lived all over the world in service of the mysteries. He was initiated as a priest of Haitian Vodou, the Hungan Asagwe, in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and is the president heresiarch of the Leonard Society, a witchcraft devoted to Tellurian and chthonic mysteries operating within the meta-current of the cosmic gnosis. He is also the co-founder of esoteric press Theon Publishing, and has lectured and published his writings internationally. In this interview, David offers us his insights into the deeper nature of the entity known as Master Leonard, who is also known as Le Grand Negre, or the Black Man. So he talks all about Master Leonard. Since our work is entirely unique in scope and focus, and can hardly be grouped together with most of what passes as traditional witchcraft or witchcraft in general, I can only speak of Leonard as they relate to our gnosis alone. So he elaborates on Master Leonard. He's talking about the witchcraft testimonies are interesting in this regard. Of course, we have to account for demonological overlays, diabolical representations of witchcraft as anti-Christianity, and confessions extracted through coercion. It's tricky to use this material as evidence, but it is tempting to wonder whether the constant references to inversion or subversion of Christian rituals might be distorted records of such underworld experiences. In ancient cultures, Egypt, the underworld is an upside-down world, a mirror world. While contact with the black man or any true demonic power can never be forced by the will, as it is the willful attempt at apprehension which drives the gods away, and which is, of course, the reason why most claims at spiritual contact in the modern West are fraudulent or delusional. His arrival can be prepared for. Relations with the black man are reciprocal, which means that only when we allow him to remain in his own essence while abiding in ours without the need for appropriation will he be able to make meaningful contact. So, like I said, if you aren't comfortable with these types of conversations, the spirit I was in communication with was not the Christian concept of the devil as the source and embodiment of the world's evil. Intellectually, I could separate him from the church's propaganda, but in quiet moments of reflection, that separation was not so easy, and I struggled with fearful thoughts as to the nature of what I was working with. The imprints of my Catholic upbringing were deeply rooted in my psyche, and yet I felt I've been protected and supported by him throughout my life. This could be all dismissed as my unverified personal gnosis, or UPG, as the kids say. I understand that, but as I discovered, there were many others who'd had similar experiences, and when you know sis, you know sis. Then he's talking about how we don't really have true darkness in our world anymore. There's a lot of light pollution, and we're viewing our entire lives through the aperture of our phone screens is a compulsion that he struggles with every day, but he's aware of how much it takes from him. Turn off the devices and the lights, and in time, you will find life in the darkness, and it will find you. Unsurprisingly, one of the communications I had from him was to limit my time online and to delete certain social media platforms, which is excellent advice, whether it comes from the devil or not. As Peter Gray and Alkistis Dimech explained, this is the voice of the Lamb, and protracted time spent in digital worlds will prevent you from hearing it clearly. For a lot of us, I'm saying myself too, this is hard to do. Like, we want what we want, but at the same time, are we willing to give up what we have for what we want? And the author of this book, he was asked, they did a, him and, let's see, Shelley and Elise. Darragh, Shelley, and Elise went to do a ritual in Dartmoor. And they talk about each one of them taking their turn to invite him in with the way they do it. And then, you know, what should we call you? And Lucifer was the answer. And how will we know you? He's the darkness, shining one. And Darragh asked, what do you want from me? And he told him one simple word, write. And the result of that writing is this book. So I highly recommend this book for anyone on the road to the dark man and his many forms, their many forms, the dark path, the left path. Yeah, I highly recommend this book. If you do not want anything with darkness, you do not want to read about some of what I have shown you here, then it's not the book for you. Otherwise, awesome. And it's my most highly recommended book so far. So yeah, Song of the Dark Man, Father of Witches and the Lord of the Crossroads, Darragh Mason.